listening to AchieveRadio.com. A new drummer for a new awakening.
Across the realms and around the world, welcome to Outside the Box. Tonight, your host and vessel of spirit is Nancy Zilversmit. We hope that you will learn to have the strength and courage to step outside the box and dwell with spirit, and to leave the old beliefs that hold you down behind you and rediscover your spirituality in new ways. Hello, it is June 24th, 2015, and this show is brought to you by www.sanctuaryofsacredspace.com. As far as events coming up, I am still running a tarot class. If you are wanting to study up on the court cards, we are starting that this week. That goes for 2 weeks. Then this is Classic Tarot, the Rider-Waite, or one of the Rider decks that are the Universal deck, or there are different versions. They have the same front, just different colors, and the same symbolism on them. So if you're interested in that, you can call me at 602-380-1171, and I'll reserve you a seat. There is a donation for attending, and I can tell you about that when you do call. You do get paperwork explaining everything, and we do a lot of reading right out of the box. So tonight we are going to talk about the difference between spiritual, supernatural, and paranormal. We're going to focus on the paranormal tonight and hit the other two in following weeks. And we are going to look specifically at paranormal because that is the newest form of the word that is being used out there. The other two have been around a very, very long time, but the word paranormal did not come around until, in the English language, until about 1905. So first off, I'm going to give you a short description from the Webster's Dictionary of 1851. And it's the second edition of the word spiritual, which means consisting of spirit, not material, incorporeal, a spiritual substance of being. The soul of man is spiritual, pertaining to the renewal nature of man, the spiritual life, not fleshly, not material, spiritual sacrifices, pertaining to divine things. A spiritual song is a divine thing. In 1851 it was. They considered that. So, spiritual court, a court held by a bishop or other ecclesiastical clergy. So what it means then and what it means now are two different things. When we get into the program on doing just the spiritual, I'll move this wire because it keeps falling down, on just the spiritual subject matter in either next week or the week after, then we will go into what the modern version of this is too, because the modern version is a little bit different than what it was in 1851. Also, the other subject was supernatural, also from the Webster's Dictionary, second edition, 1851, is being beyond or exceeding the powers and the laws of nature, the miraculous. A supernatural event is one that is not produced according to the ordinary or established laws of natural things. It is caused by a divine power, especially exerted to suspend a law of nature. Supernatural events or miracles, which is considered a supernatural event, are produced only by the immediate agency of a divine power. Then we get into something different. We get into something totally different, which is the paranormal. And like I said, it was not in the 1851 dictionary. It did not exist then. It did not exist in the English language until 1905. It is consisted of two words which have separate meanings. And the word normal means what is accepted by science. Okay, what is accepted by science. And para means outside and beyond. So paranormal, outside and beyond what is accepted by science. So first known use in America was in the 1920s. Even though the word was established in 1905, it wasn't until the 1920s it started getting used commonly. The medical definition, because paranormal is also a medical definition, is not understandable in the terms of known scientific laws and phenomenon. In other words, it is not scientifically explainable. When something is scientifically explainable, it means that you can test something and get the same results over and over and over again. With the paranormal, they can't get the same results. Each case is different. Each case is not identical. If you look into or work in the paranormal, you will understand that if you have anything to do with this, which I do in my life, and I know several other people who are listening or who work in the field of the paranormal, know that it is very unpredictable. You get what happens, and it's not something you can put into a scientific lab to be repeated over and over again to get the same result. Therefore, science likes to try and debunk some of what we call the paranormal. And with the paranormal, the events and phenomenon are usually described in popular culture, in folklore, and non-scientific bodies of knowledge. And it lies beyond normal experience or scientific explanation. So a lot of paranormal beliefs, and they call them beliefs because they can't prove them, even though many of us who experience these things know that they're there. And people who are into ghost hunting, it doesn't matter how many pictures of orbs you take, it doesn't matter how much video footage that you've got, the scientific community is going to say it still doesn't exist, unless it does. Unless they have the proof that they need to call it, yes, a scientific normal phenomenon. It's like we have lots of groups out there who are trying to prove this. I was recently invited to be a participant in a group that is looking at the afterlife, and unfortunately, you have to pay to belong to the group, and it's okay. It helps pay the expenses for that group to exist, because they are doing a documentary on the existence of the afterlife and on ghosts. And they're trying to do it scientifically. They've got a lot of the big names that are out there that deal with spirits. And I was invited to it, but it's going to have to wait probably until next month before I sign up for it. They want to run groups in different areas of the United States and in different countries of the world. They've got a few out of England and a couple other places. And what they do is that when you have these groups and you start getting phenomenon happening, which happens very regular with me. I don't even have to ask for it to happen, but they are looking for things like what you'll see in the movie Poltergeist, but they're also looking for milder things as well. And they're looking for groups of people who are willing to participate in these experiences, and possibly in the filming of the documentary that's supposedly coming out in another year. So they've been at it for a while, and they're still gathering their information. But it still falls under paranormal because it cannot scientifically be proved, no matter how much footage you have on video or how much you have on recording. If you record sounds or voices, they just try and write it off. So the other thing that is also under the paranormal beliefs is extraterrestrial life, UFOs, unidentified flying objects, psychic abilities. Everybody has psychic abilities, but they still put it under the paranormal because they can't put it under the microscope. So psychic abilities or extrasensory perception, and cryptids. Cryptids. We're going to go into what that is later on too. And the cryptids are a very niche group, and a lot of people try to explain them away, like unicorns and stuff like that, but that's not in the cryptids thing. But people will try and explain them away. Okay, so let's see what we have here, and I've already explained all of what is on the first page here. Okay, so paranormal is considered to be pseudoscience because it doesn't fall under normal science. And it's only a subset of pseudoscience. There's a lot of pseudoscience out there, which means like science, but not scientific. It's pseudoscience is it relies on the explanations of people who have had the experiences, and it's very well it's established as something that really exists, except for they can't repeat it. So scientifically, so it's phenomenon that can include extrasensory perception, which is somebody can like if you have a deck of cards with symbols on them, and you have somebody doing a blind test, and there's people here in Arizona that have been doing that for years. To belong to a specific group, you have to go take this blind test, and it's where there are symbols on these cards that's behind a screen, and one person behind a screen is pointing to the card or holding the card, and the person on the other side is supposed to tell them what the symbol is. Not my forte. I don't really like doing that kind of stuff, even though when I do readings, sometimes I will hold a card upside down in my hand and explain to a person the messages that are coming through or the energy that's coming through the card. Then I'll flip the card over and it's exactly what I just talked about. So I don't do well under scientific microscopes, but I do well when it's concerning other matters, when there's actually something that spirit needs to deliver a message for. So the other thing is telekinesis and ghosts. We've talked about poltergeists, which is a little different from ghosts. The life after death, reincarnation, faith healing. Faith healing is what you will see mostly in churches, but if you want to carry that into more modern stuff, any type of the spiritual healing that's out there, be it Reiki or spiritual healing, laying on of hands, demanding that a person be healed by using the voice, by using sound, and instruments and drums. Drums are very common. I've used those in some ceremonies myself. Drumming, changing the vibration in the room by using tuning forks, singing bowls, crystal bowls, the brass bowls, bells, ting saws. There's a whole list of things that can be used, and changing the vibration in the room. And what it does is it forms a healing. It forms a healing. So you're doing it out of, well, some people are just doing it because that's the way the ritual is supposed to be written to be done, or they were taught that way. But if they are spiritual, they work with spirit, then it's considered a faith healing as well. So that would fall under that category, because Reiki now is considered a religion, and then there are some other forms of healing that are out there that fall under that category as well. Human auras. A human aura is the energy field that is around you, and it can be anywhere from about an inch from your body to expanding out way beyond yourself. It depends on how much you have developed your energy field, and it is in many layers. It is in many layers and connects to the chakra system of the body, which are the energy centers in the body. Some people believe that those just run from the root, which is the base of the crotch, up through the head to just above the head, which actually it goes way, way beyond that, and connects out to the divine. But if you have things going on in your life, before it affects you in the body, it affects you in the energy. So any kind of trauma that you have, any kind of stress that you have, any happiness you have, if you picked up hitchhikers, which are other spirits or entities, if you picked up somebody's negative energy, that all will settle into your aura system. And if you don't clean it up, then it moves into the chakra system. If you still don't take care of it, you deny its existence, especially stress. Stress will start out into your energy field, and it can go very quickly through the aura system into the chakra system, into the physical body. Then we get the back aches, the shoulder aches, the neck aches, the headaches, and those are stress related. It can be emotional. It can also be physical issues also. And it's said, but it's not put it under the scientific microscope, that things like cancer, disease, immunity, all these things will exist in your energy if you don't take care of whatever it is that's causing it. And then they also link it to your physical body, because the chakra system links to the physical body. And if you want to go into the Chinese system, you have the meridian system, and the meridians run from the top of the hands and the head all the way down through the body. Whereas the Western man, it goes, the body stretches out this way. In the Chinese, it stretches straight up, goes all the way down through the system and down and out the toes. So that's all tied in energetically into the organs of the body. So this is all considered pseudoscience, even though when you use it and it works. Acupuncture falls under that as well. It falls under pseudoscience, but doesn't fall under the paranormal, because now it is acceptable and is even being used in medical centers and hospitals. I know the VA where I work has acupuncture as an option. And so even though there's a lot of complaints about the medical system, there are some of these alternative things that have been used for thousands and thousands of years that are now being accepted by modern man in the Western system. So I'm kind of getting off course here, but I'm just talking, going on about that. So anyway, explanations of those who allied phenomenon and are phrased in vague terms. They call them psychic forces. Okay. And you will find a lot of people now, and in different cultures, use the term psychic forces, especially if they have somebody that they think is throwing negative energy at them, attacking them psychically. These things do happen. It doesn't happen to everybody. It's not always the case, even if a person comes to you and says that that's the problem. Sometimes that is not the problem. It's other issues that are tied to the energy field, and determining that is not something that science is going to be able to work out, but you visit a healer or a shaman, and they will be able to help you with those. So psychic forces, human energy fields, and so on. And the human energy field is also called the aura. So that is also the human energy field, and the chakra system or the meridian system, depending on if you're going by Eastern culture or Western culture. It is also possible to combine both the Western and the Eastern belief systems in the energy. I've been trained in both, and it depends on what I'm led by the psychic forces, what I am led to work on a person to help them, give them some relief as to the issue that they have come in with, even if it's spiritual, if it's physical, if it's a combination of both. Sometimes if you get rid of the spiritual issues, then the physical issues do clear up. And sometimes it's immediate. Okay, so all of this is considered paranormal, and So other systems, other phenomenon, other pseudo scientific explanations um, are considered, what would I call it? Are considered acceptable if it's like acupuncture. They've put it down to where they can do it as a science, okay, and get good results, okay. But the thing is that even if it's a pseudoscience and it's got repetitive results, results that can be repeated, if you're being treated for headaches or something, and you're doing the acupuncture thing. Acupressure works also, but they don't consider that because that's an energy thing. So anyway, even though it's I'm using acupuncture as a example, a non-paranormal phenomenon, even what they consider bad science is still acceptable by science. If it's bad science, it's acceptable by science because it can be repeated. And it's just that their explanations are just very, very far out there. Okay, so anyway, a ghost is a manifestation of a spirit or a soul of a person. Alternative theories expand on the idea and include the belief in ghosts of deceased animals. There's a lot of people that don't believe in the deceased animals piece, but I'll tell you what, I've had spirits of cats and dogs, mostly cats because I've had a lot of cats over the years, and cats and dogs and other animals and that have passed through my house. And I've also been to houses that were on former dairy farms, and people are seeing horses, they're seeing cows, or they're hearing the noise, but there's nothing there, and it's deceased animals. And it's just like, okay, let me teach you how to pass those spirits out of this realm so that they can move on, especially if it was a slaughterhouse they were killed at, and they didn't know what was going on, but they could smell it, and they just don't leave the area. The spirits just don't leave the area. Veterinary hospitals are another one where they gather, pet stores, places where animals are in physical life. They tend to congregate in places when they're deceased. If they don't just pass over, they will hang out in an area until they get passed or gathered up and taken off of this realm. That falls into the psychopomp explanation, which I've explained in the past. Sorry, my throat got dry. And so we will go ahead on that. We are going a little bit forward. Some of the beliefs in ghosts and souls of the departed are tied to the concept of animism. Animism, an ancient belief where it attributes souls to everything in nature, which means that plants have a soul, rocks have a soul, the earth has a soul, everything in nature has a soul. And sometimes these souls are seen as a creature within the animated body. So if a person is, and this is another experience that people have had, they will feel the brushing up against them of animals. They will feel the fur. They will feel an animal purring or whatever it is, something that was precious to them that passed over, and is no longer in a physical body, but they actually see the animated body or feel the animated body. It is held that the soul is the exact reproduction of the body in every feature, right down to the clothing that a person wore. I know that when people have seen my grandfather with me, they'll describe the clothing. It's usually, if he's showing his older self, he's showing the clothes that he wore in the 70s and until his death. In the 90s, he was still wearing the polyester. He wore the polyester, and then he wore cotton shirts, or he wore the plaid, whatever. He would he would wear these things until they wore out and fell apart before he could get rid of them. But they will see him, if he appears next to me, or if I have another medium in the room, he'll appear and they'll go, hey, there's this older man, and they'll give the description, and I'll say, just tell me what his clothes are, because I know who it is already, and they'll describe the clothes, and I'll go, yep, that's him. It's very it's been acceptable in many cultures over the centuries. The Egyptian Book of the Dead also shows deceased people in afterlife looking like they did when before they died, and including the style of dress. I've had people who've seen Indians when we were on the reservation, sometimes down here, because we've got a lot of little reservations in the Phoenix area, and also pioneer people, what do you call them, trappers, and other people who have distinct style of dress. My old business, people would see the Victorian people come through there. This was in Old Town Glendale. They would see Victorian people come in there. Then they would see people dressed from the 1920s, the 1950s, different time periods, and they were dressed as they were before they died, or they wore something that they were wearing something that they wore in their lifetime. So even though they consider evidence for ghosts to be largely anecdotal, the belief in ghosts throughout history remains widespread and persistent, and it's not going away anytime soon. So when we also look at the paranormal and think of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Okay, I've seen UFOs on 2 different occasions, one here in Phoenix over South Mountain, and one up north out at a camping ground where there was nothing out there except pure sky, thousands of stars, and this thing that was just going across the sky and zigzag stop, zigzag stop, zigzag stop. And then it took off, and it's just like my friend was talking about something that she had experienced in the skies, and I went, no, it's a UFO, and I had to literally turn her head over there. Okay, that's what it is. The first one I saw was in broad daylight. That was the one in Phoenix, and the other one was at night, and that was out in the wilderness. So. Lot of different things that we see out there. Okay, and they consider it paranormal because where's the scientific evidence? You have these, you have the things written by the government that were sealed for years, the Area 51. You have the supposedly they've got spaceships. Nothing's been brought forward, so they're keeping the paranormal title on there, because things are not being brought forward. Supposedly there's been corpses and all kinds of things. So, Scientists have actively engaged in the search for unicellular life within the solar system and carried on studies on the surface of Mars and examining meteorites. Projects such as SETI has been searching for radioactivity. I don't know how SETI works now. It used to be where you would give them permission and access to use your computer, and this was back in the 90s. I had a PC at the time that I set up for SETI. You had to download their program, and it allowed them to have access to your computer and use it as a server for all this information that they were trying to gather, looking for sounds and radioactivity out in the stars in the solar system. The SETI is still around. I don't think they do it that way anymore. I think they've got more technological advances in that area. The paranormal aspect of extraterrestrial life surrounds largely around the belief in the UFOs and the phenomenon said to be associated with it. Those who are more serious into the studies of UFOs call themselves UFOologists, and they began back in the 1950s and felt that logical analysis of sightings reported would validate the notion of extraterrestrial visitation. There are large groups out there, still out there. They hold conventions. They get together. I went to one back in, when was it? Late 70s? Late 70s. It was after I had seen the UFO over South Mountain. And boy, they had a lot of their own evidence. They had people who had worked for the government, that no longer worked for the government, and what they called witnesses to the events, and a lot of people who've experienced it. The second camp believes that they've coupled ideas of extraterrestrial visitation with the beliefs of existing quasi-religious movements. Now, that's the one that's been very common in the last decade or so, that you've got these people who say that they're being visited by extraterrestrials. They consider it their way of life, they're a piece of their religion. You had a bunch of people that committed suicide. Oh my gosh, this has got to be about 20 years ago. It's been quite a long time. They committed suicide together. They laid down. They had everything laid down and laid out, and they thought that once they let go of the body, that they were going to be taken up to the mothership. A lot of other religions out there. You've got Scientology. If you really look into it and get past all the hoo-ha and the fact that you're giving them a lot of money to do that, when it comes down to it, Ron L. Hubbard wrote Pulp Fiction before he created a religion. Okay, he wrote Pulp Fiction. It was all about life out in the stars. It was about aliens coming to take over the planet. It was about aliens that look like humans from other planets that were involved in a lot of science fiction wars and what have you. And if you get to the top of his religion, the scientific religion, Scientology religion, excuse me, they believe that the mothership is coming. I mean, that there are aliens, and they've even got out in the middle of the desert somewhere, they've got this big underground bunker that the head people can go to in case something happens. And it's just like, okay, we bring it into modern day religion. The Theosophists, which they came out, I think, in the 1800s. Yeah, the 1800s. The 1800s they started, and they have a lot of doctrine that they've written. They have a lot of doctrine that they've written about the UFOs, the aliens, the contact, the descriptions. Spiritualists sometimes get into that, but it depends on which version of spiritualists we're talking about. The ones that belong to the national spiritualist group, they keep it to dead people. They don't like to bring in anything else. They just leave it to dead people. And UFOs are and angels and stuff are not something that is really spoken of. I know that when I went to Lilydale a few years ago up in New York, which is a spiritualist camp up there, I watched what they were doing when they had people come up that they had pre-picked to speak. One of the guest speakers started talking about angels and other spirits and stuff. They took her off that mic very quickly and got back to the subject of dead people and ghosts. But they weren't as accurate as you would think, because my aunt, who's also a medium, and I were sitting there, and one of the people that was up supposedly passing messages wasn't passing all of it. We had a suicide victim that was standing next to us wanting to pass messages to his family, and we're going like, we're not allowed up on the mic. We're in the audience, but we can help you any way we can. We did get him passed over, but yeah, if it falls under religion, it usually is a process, and that they like to follow their doctrines, their rituals, and whatever it is. There are those who are not tied into religion, and they fall under New Age, and they also have a belief in the UFOs and the aliens. And I know that I have described on the air before when, oh, hold on. Okay. My phone was vibrating. I have described on the air of the instances where, and in the classroom also, I've had students where they have seen some of the alien spirits that are working with me. So I've had the greys, I've had the reptilians, I've had the ones that look like insects, and so it's just like, especially if I'm in a healing situation and I have students in the room where I have the person who's on the table, sometimes they see what's going on and they're going, what is that thing behind you that looks like a praying mantis? I said, yeah, that's just one of the healers that's working on you right now. So if you have any star connection in your soul, that's who showed up. Or, or what is ailing you is something that's dealing with visitations or abductions. I get abduction people too. And other issues, if the energy that you need or the healer that you need to come in is alien, that's what shows up. And people have identified them. So that brings us into cryptids. These are fun. These are a cryptid is an animal whose existence is not confirmed by science, and it could be an animal that's considered to be extinct, that they have never found evidence of. So claims of cryptid sightings have occurred, and it's been documented for centuries as to what these are. And today, the ones you hear about most of today that are popular are Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, a non-living bird dinosaur, and I guess people have seen them, non-living bird dinosaur. Wow, okay, I have not seen any of that. Mothman, the Jersey Devil, dragons, okay, unicorns are included in there. Unicorns and werewolves. Vampires are not considered in there in that group. I'm sure if I got a different source, they probably would be. So, but they've never brought forward physical evidence of some of these things, and they remain a mystery, even though people have shot pictures of them and supposedly have been injured by them or killed by them. The Chupacabra thing pops up here in Arizona every now and then. We get people that consider a hairless, ugly-looking dog a Chupacabra, but yeah, it just depends. It's always been disapproved. And then there's the fakes that have been going around for a few centuries too. If you go to the Ripley's, believe it or not, you see the mermaid, which is actually probably a monkey sewed to something else. It's just like you get a lot of the fakes out there. A lot of them end up in road shows, they used to the old carnival side shows and stuff. They used to bring those in. And a lot of them were fake. People paid good money to go in and see a fake, and still do. You go to some of the Ripley's, believe it or not, they have a lot of real stuff, but then they have the real fakes that were also out there on the road. So all of that is considered cryptid. That is what cryptids are. These are unusual beings, animals, whatever they are creatures that they have no physical evidence for, and we are still waiting for the Bigfoot. But what I was reading just recently, the Neanderthals interbreeded with humans a lot more than people think, and you may have the blood ancestry of a Neanderthal. They say 1 in 3 people does. So yeah, if they could trace you by your bloodline, not your family history, but your bloodline. Somewhere in there you will have some Neanderthals, which in this day and age, or prior to this day and age were considered probably in the cryptids, and then science actually found evidence of these people. So you never know. And now they're saying that we all, 1 in 3 of us, is carrying that DNA. Okay, and which for them proves the point that they interbred a lot with modern humans, modern type humans back. This was still thousands of years ago, but they're thinking about maybe 35,000 years ago. They were still interbreeding. Okay, paranormal research. Paranormal research. Okay, often difficult. It's, as a research perspective, it's often very difficult because of the lack of acceptable physical evidence and for most of the phenomenon. I've experienced some of the phenomenon. I've seen things move across the rooms. I've seen doors slam. I've seen, I've heard noises. I've heard noises that nobody else in the room is hearing. Gunshots going off, people banging at the door, and there's nobody there. And nobody else in the house is hearing it. Stuff like that. And that's things that they pick up on camera, on video, with these different research people, the pseudo-research people. And by definition, paranormal does not conform to conventional expectations of nature. Yes, we know that. Therefore, confirmation in the paranormal phenomenon is basically cannot be, even though they try to use the scientific method, it basically is not acceptable. When I did go, I've made a couple of trips out to New York. I was invited again this fall, but I'm not going to be going. But the thing is that my aunt, even though she's a medium and that she can hear spirits and she can speak to spirits and she can see spirits, she got a hold of one of those little things that measures the energy in the area that you see the ghost hunters use. And she had one, and she insisted on taking it everywhere. So in some places, in the cemeteries, we got a little reading here, got a little reading there. If she was talking to a dead relative, we were standing at the grave, she's talking to him, it would flicker a little bit, so she considered that a response. And then when we went to the mental asylum, which was for sale at the time, I don't know if they've sold it, that had 2 football-size mass graves. Before we even got out of the car, her little EMF machine was just going off scale. And I said, yeah, we're going to start passing souls right here before we get out of the car, and going to take it right out to the mass graves. The one mass grave was all children. The other one was the women and the men, the adults. And I get to clean up some water I just spilled. There we go. The mass graves, and until all the spirits had passed, she just was getting energy readings off the scale, and they don't record. I mean, you could videotape it, but since science can't duplicate it, I'm sure if we went back out there, since we passed all the souls that were from that era that were buried there, you would pick up only the energy, the residue energy of the asylum. We didn't get as much energy out of the asylum buildings as out at the mass graves. And yeah, I'd be interested to see or ask my aunt if that place ever got sold. Who wants to buy a huge mental asylum with many buildings and huge mass graves? Was up for sale. Wow. Somebody would. Who knows what they would turn it into, though. Okay, so basically that when researchers simply study the beliefs in the paranormal, regardless of whether or not the phenomena are considered objectively to exist, they still don't accept it. There are a lot of skeptics out there. There are people who exist just to disprove the existence of everything a psychic does, of everything that has to deal with the paranormal. There's one gentleman out there that he's put up $1 million if somebody could give him proof. This was several years ago he did it, and nobody's collected to this day. Nobody has collected to this day on that. But he is very good at tearing people down and tearing down their belief systems. In about 1920, a gentleman named Charles Fort went around talking to people. He went around talking to people and gathering their experiences, and he wrote them. And then he published it several times because over the years he kept adding more and kept adding more. This was considered this is the word I had a problem pronouncing before, anecdotal approach, okay, which is stories about the paranormal. And this gentleman lived from 1874 to 1930, but in 1920 he published his book. And he compiled as many as 40,000 notes on unexplained paranormal experiences. And that there were no doubt, and there's no doubt there were many, many more. He said that the orthodox conventionality of science considered these odd events, and these odd events were reported in the Times and scientific journals such as the Scientific American and Natural Science. He wrote 7 books. Only 4 survive to this day. And you got to understand, science was different back in those days. So they did publish things. They published because he collected the stories of people. He wrote a book called The Book of the Damned, The New Lands, Lo, and The Wild Talents. The one that was written between The New Lands and Lo was abandoned and absorbed into Lo. So what he had is he took some of his information and he put it into other books later instead of just making a different book. He collected the events on teleportation, poltergeist events, falls of frogs and fishes and other inorganic material that just fell from the sky. Nowadays we would give some scientific meaning behind why such things happen, like tons of frogs falling from the sky or fish in an area where those things don't exist or exist in very small portions but have never seen fallen from the skies. And inorganic materials, well, nowadays, if they dump the poop out of a plane, they can explain it that way, but back then they didn't. So, crop circles, we still get those today. Unaccountable noises and explosions. I have heard those myself. Giant wheels of light in the oceans. Animals found outside their normal ranges, such as the phantom cat, which we talked about already. Animals that were former pets or who existed and didn't pass over. So the phantom animals. And he also had many reports of what they call OOP-arts, an abbreviation for out-of-place artifacts, strange items found in unlikely locations. And he's perhaps the first person to explain strange human appearances and disappearances, such as alien abduction, but they didn't call it that back then. They didn't call it alien abduction. They called it strange human appearances and disappearances. So, and you can probably consider lost time in that, because a lot of times they don't remember. Except under hypnosis, and then they can go through the whole process again, and then they explain what happened. Some remember very, very clearly what happened to them during that period of time, and others, it's considered lost time. I've met people who have lost time. A couple of truck drivers I've met over the years that have been driving and don't know how they got from one state to several states over. That time is just lost to them. They have no recollection. It's not drugs, it's not drinking, it's not overtiredness. And sometimes it just happened as they just got into the truck and got out into the middle of nowhere and suddenly lost time. And then they're a few states over and they're still driving, and it's just like, what happened? What time is it? Where am I at? And it's not in their journals. So because the truck drivers have to keep journals and account for their time. Anyway, he was Mr. Fort. Charles Fort was considered the father of modern paranormalism, and which is the study of the paranormal. Okay, and there's a lot of collections out there. They lack reproducibility or empirical evidence, and they are not able to put it under the microscope. So they're not able to have scientific investigation into these things. So it gets thrown into paranormal. It gets thrown into the paranormal. And then we have what we call parapsychologists, and they look for quantitative evidence of the paranormal in laboratories. And that's sort of like the ones that I discussed that test the psychics here in Arizona. They have since moved out of the ASU area, and they have a place of their own. Over the years, they've lost their grants and stuff to be working with the college, and they now do it by private grants and monies. So it is usually a participant observer approach, and where something happens and another person watches it, or the parapsychology. The research sometimes it describes the subjects as they are experiencing rather than to explain them. Many, many years ago, I was tested by a person who did a lot of brain activity measurements, and he measured when I would have a spirit stepping in. First, he measured 1 minute of me with my normal brain activity, and then I gave him a list of the names of some of my spirits. And we went through 2 sessions of this. And he would give a name, and it would switch right over to the spirit that would step in. And totally different brain activity. He was amazed because I had dead humans, religious figures, angelics, and people who were not so nice in life, and all the way up to the divine, okay, which you would call God. I called Source. And he was amazed because human brain waves do not change their pattern. My normal brain wave, he would give 30 seconds between the spirits, and I would return to a normal brain wave. And then he would name the next one on the list, and they would step in. And the whole brainwave thing happened again. I have some of those still in my possession. He would not give me all of them. But I do have some of those test results, and it shows the brain activity and the little EEG. What is it called? Where it's sort of similar to an EKG, except it's of the brain and not the heart. So I still have some of those, and he was amazed when he asked for Source to step in, and the whole thing just went perfect flatline. And he went, the human brain can't do that. And he told me afterwards, he showed it to me, and he says, the human brain can't do that. I said, look at who you asked in. That's not my brainwave. And I was wearing one of those caps with the sensors, and it did not move or come off during that whole thing. It's just like there was nothing to explain, nothing was detached, and then he asked for the next being to come through, and it started up again. So he never shared that publicly. He went into studying meditation, monks and sisters and stuff like that, and it's just like, okay, afraid to take the evidence he had and put it out there because he couldn't reproduce it. Oh well. He still got it as far as I know. Someday somebody is going to bring that forward. Anyway, Scientific gathering methods, the EMF readings at haunted locations. We've talked about that already. They have their own criticisms beyond the participant observer approach. There is the approach to the paranormal being gain increased visibility and popularity through reality television programs. There's been movies out there, and the programs like Ghost Hunters, and there's several others out there now, and independent ghost hunting groups. We're usually at odds about what you should do with dead souls or entities. I don't believe as they believe. But anyway, we will continue with this next week. And I'm going to say goodbye. You can catch me on Facebook, Nancy Zilversmit. Phone number is 602-380-1171.